Hello, I'm Gordon Lang, editor of CameraLabs.com. I'd like to give you a brief video tour around the Sony DT 16 to 80mm lens. Here it is, the 16 to 80mm. It's a general purpose 5x optical zoom lens designed for use on Sony Alpha digital SLRs, and I've got it mounted here on the Sony A100 body. On this body it will give you an equivalent coverage of 24 to 120mm, which takes you from decent wide angle to fairly respectable telephoto. We've got some coverage examples of that coming right up. It also goes wider and zooms longer than the standard kit lens, so it's a good upgrade option if you want a longer range and also better quality. Or alternatively, if you're buying a new Alpha DSLR and you want a decent lens from day one, it's a good general purpose option to consider. Now this lens is actually one of the most highly anticipated in the Alpha range, and that's because it's the first Alpha zoom that's been designed by the legendary manufacturer Carl Zeiss, so expectations are very high for this lens. So let's see what it actually gives you above the standard kit lens in practice. Now in terms of design, if you're familiar with the Sony 18 to 70mm kit lens, you'll notice that this actually looks very similar. It's only slightly larger than the standard kit lens, although if I zoom it into its maximum focal length of 80mm, you'll see the barrel does extend quite a bit more. Fortunately though, if you're zooming out and you've got it pointing all the way up, there's no concerns over creep. The barrel here isn't falling back under its own weight, so that's good news. However, while this lens is heavier and more substantial than the standard kit lens, and as such it actually feels more confident in use and better balanced on the A100 body, the build quality is actually not that big a step up over the kit lens. It's not like upgrading from, say, a Canon or a Nikon kit lens to one of their premium models, so that's a little bit of a disappointment. One of the things you'll notice this lens does have over the kit model though is a manual focusing ring and also a window showing the focus distance marks. Now one of the other good aspects of this over the kit lens is that the end section doesn't rotate when you're focusing, which is great news if you're using a polarizing filter. But I just want to show you something here in terms of focusing. If I bring the lens right up to the camera here, and I'm going to half press the shutter release button to autofocus, have a listen and watch the element. Now you'll have heard the gearing there. The motor noise was actually pretty loud, and it also wasn't particularly quick when it went from its closest to its longest focusing distance and back again. Now that's because this lens uses the focusing motor that's built into the A100's body, and as such its focusing speed and the noise it makes while it's doing it is also not that much different from the kit lens. So again, if you were hoping for an upgrade in terms of autofocus speed and noise, you're not really going to get it with this, and it is again another disappointment compared to the focusing systems like say Canon's USM, Nikon's SWM, or indeed Sony's own SSM focusing systems. But that's enough about the physical characteristics of this lens. Let's have a look at what it can actually deliver in terms of optical quality. We'll start with coverage. This shot was taken with the standard 18 to 70mm kit lens zoomed all the way out and delivering an equivalent coverage of 27mm. That's fairly standard wide angle. Now this next shot was taken with the 16 to 80mm zoomed all the way out and offering an equivalent coverage of 24mm, and you can see it's noticeably wider. The 24mm focal length is really useful to have in practice, and we've got some more examples of how you can use that coming right up. Next up, here's the kit lens fully zoomed in to 70mm. This is giving an equivalent coverage of 105mm. Next, the 16 to 80 zoomed all the way in and giving an equivalent of 120mm, and you can see that it's zoomed in a little bit closer. So overall, the 16 to 80mm does give a much more flexible range than the standard kit lens. It goes both wider and longer and is therefore much more useful in day-to-day photography. To illustrate how you might use that 24mm wide angle, here's a shot taken from a boat which shows a great deal of the front of the boat itself and also of the background. 24mm is great for grabbing great big shots like this. It does really capture a very wide field. 24mm is also an ideal focal length to have at your disposal when you're taking pictures indoors, such as of this church. It's very handy when you literally can't step back any further and allows you to squeeze in a lot. It's also great for big group shots as well. With the lens fully zoomed into 80mm and working at an equivalent of 120mm, you can also get pretty close to your subjects. This shot of a boat was taken from quite a long way away, but zooming all the way in on this lens has allowed us to capture a decent amount of detail. Alternatively, it's great for portraits or even wildlife. This photograph of a bird was taken at very close range with the aperture wide open, and you can see it's produced a really nice out of focus effect in the background. It's really great for portraits, although that slowish focusing speed does mean that if you are taking pictures of animals, if they're moving quickly, you could get a little bit frustrated. The Sony 16 to 80mm is a bit of a mixed bag in practice. On the upside, it offers an extremely flexible optical range that goes both wider and longer than the kit lens. And if you head on over to cameralabs.com to our full review of this lens, and in particular check out the outdoor results and the gallery pages, there you'll see that this lens is capable of delivering absolutely superb results compared to the kit lens. So in these respects, it's a great option, but it's not all good news. On the downside, as we've already mentioned in the review, the build quality is not that big a step up from the standard kit lens, and neither is the focusing speed or the noise that it makes when it's focusing. And while we're talking about focusing, the manual focusing ring itself just isn't really very smooth when you turn it compared to other premium options. And you should be comparing it to the premium options because at this price and at this level, if you were buying a lens from say Canon or Nikon, you would expect to get superior build quality to the kit lens and something that also focuses much more quietly and much quicker. So there's quite a few things to weigh up if you're considering this lens. If your subjects aren't moving very quickly or can be persuaded to stand still and focusing speed and noise isn't that much of an issue, then certainly you will enjoy superb optical quality and a very flexible range with this lens. But if you're after something that is significantly better in terms of build quality and focusing than the kit lens, you could be disappointed. To see full results for this lens compared against the standard Sony 18 to 70mm kit model, head on over to cameralabs.com and check out our full review.